Hi, we're here at NASCC, the Steel Conference in Charlotte, North Carolina, and sitting across from me is David Zalesne, president of Owen Steel Company and a former chair of the ASC Board of Directors, but still a current board member. David is this year's Robert P. Stupp Award for Leadership Excellence winner. David is also only the 10th Stupp Award winner since the program's inception in 1998. David, really, congratulations.
Thank you.
Good to see you. I hope you've been well. Actually, I've been asking everybody this. How many NASCCs or steel conferences have you been to at this point?
So I got into the industry in 2004. Probably my first one was in 2005 or 2006. And so not really good at math, but however many there have been since then, I've been to all of them, and they just get better every year.
Oh yeah, that's good to hear. Yeah, no, this one seems like it might be one of our biggest, if not the biggest. Speaking of how you got into the steel industry or when you got in, you've taken a very interesting path here, different than anybody else I've talked to. Can you kind of walk us through that a little bit?
Sure. So I grew up in Philadelphia. I went to college in Philadelphia, went to law school, went back to Philadelphia and was practicing law for a while. I was in the U.S. Attorney's Office. I prosecuted some cases. I had a mix of business litigation and some white collar criminal defense work. But I always liked the business world. I had a nice practice, but I always sort of teetered on the edges of working in-house with a client or being in a business. And my wife's family's been in the steel fabrication business and had an opportunity to buy Owen Steel at a time when it was having some trouble after the New York market had shut down in 2001 after 9/11. So I went down to Columbia, South Carolina, really to do due diligence on the potential acquisition. And about 6 weeks later, had been sort of talked into coming down to South Carolina to get involved in the business. And 19 years lader, still doing it and still loving every day of it. So it was a circuitous route, or it was an unexpected route, but I've now been in the steel business longer than I practiced law, so it's now more than half of my career.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah, I didn't know you had reached that point where you've been
the
here
tipping
longer.
point, right?
Right. And I know a lot of Owen's work is mostly, I mean, not all of it, but a lot of it is back up in the Northeast. So I'm sure you get to get back up there.
Right, we get the best of both
basis.
worlds. I mean, I get to live in a really nice environment. All three of my kids were raised in South Carolina. One of them's working with me now, but lives in New York. But we work in one of the greatest construction markets in the world. I mean, we're building a lot of high rises in New York City and other parts of infrastructure. We had 5 or 6 contracts at the World Trade Center site, so we were really heavily involved in rebuilding, that very high-profile site. We've done a lot of work at airports in the New York region, Newark and LaGuardia. So, but we also do a lot of other projects. And nice thing about having a plant, and we have our primary plant in South Carolina. We also have a plant in Delaware. We have a pretty nice footprint situated to be able to handle projects really up and down the eastern seaboard. So from New York to Florida, we have projects in I think 6 states going right now. So we have we have a niche and a brand in the New York market, but we also have a pretty strong footprint throughout the eastern part of the United States.
Okay. Well, speaking of projects, you've done a lot at this point since you've been there for so long. But do you have any, or maybe a better question is this: what was your first project that you were fully installed at Owen Steel for?
So we first got involved and we promised the banks and the bonding company, because we were buying a company that had just gone through a really rough financial period, right? I mean, you had 9/11. Owen had been very big in the New York market before 9/11, was bought by a competitor in that market. The New York market really came to a halt until Congress put terrorism insurance backstops in place. So there really weren't a lot of high-rises built in New York City from 2001 to 2004.
Right, true.
So, and the market also at that time had shaken out. There were other fabricators who had gone out of business in that window, primarily in that market. And so we got involved and said, okay, when I came into the business, we would start kind of small. I think our first project might have been a truss for a church in Columbia, South Carolina somewhere. It was literally very small.
Right.
And fairly soon we were into some contractors in New York. And one of them had gone out of business and needed some fabrication work. So we got a piece of the New York Times Tower.
Oh,
and then
wow.
we had some other work that came along in New York, and pretty soon we were doing within a year, I think we were doing the Bank of America Tower in New York City. So fairly quickly after we got back, we got away from the roof, the trusses for a church back into the New York high-rise market, and probably within the first 8 to 10 months, we were back in that market, pretty heavily. And we've had some great projects. We've been on a run in that market for a very long time, and been fortunate.
Yeah, that's a pretty quick turnaround.
Well, we have the physical capacity. I mean, the one nice thing about the Owen Steel business is that it has a tremendous work. I mean, people have been with that company. We still have a lot of people who have been there for the 19 years I've been there, and they've been there for a lot longer than that, both in the shop and in the office. So you had a lot of, it wasn't like we were building a startup from scratch. You were taking over a company that already had a really good legacy and just trying to restore that. But the physical capacity of the plant, the workmanship, the talent, the project managers, the estimators, the parts of the components were all there. It had just gone through some rough financials, and so we were able to recapitalize it and rebuild that piece of it. But once the market took off again, we had opportunities, and so now, you go through the cycles of the markets and other issues, but for the most part, we've been pretty fortunate to be able to stay ahead of the game.
Sure. And you talk about capacity remaining the same, but when did you open up, or what did you acquire? The shop in Delaware, when did that come along?
So the story on that is that we were in the process. We had a contract to build Tower 3 at the World Trade Center site, and our partners, both to fabricate and erect, were in that business in Wilmington. And the building went forward to start, but they didn't have a tenant. So there was a planned pause in the erection of a 27,000 story high rise. Well, by the time we came back, our partner was no longer financially able to make it back to the party. So we ended up buying the fab shop from, just made a deal with basically the bank to buy the fab shop. The erection company went out of business. We ended up bringing in a different erector to finish the erection of the tower, but we were able to buy the fab shop, and fairly shortly after that, the owner got their financing in place, so we were able to hit the ground running really with start fabricating and generating revenue fairly quickly. But it's been a great shop for us. I mean, it gives us a nice footprint, and right now we have a lot of work in the Philadelphia market, New Jersey, Northeast market. New York's been a little bit slow in the last few months relative to the last decade or so.
Right.
But again, because we have that footprint, we can be a little bit flexible with our geographic markets.
Sure. Speaking of New York and Philadelphia, just large cities in general, I mean, after COVID, when everybody, or at the beginning, when everybody sort of decided that, well, we can work from home, maybe not all the time, but some of the time, has that been affecting things much as far as high-rise construction?
I think New York was always going to be a little bit overbuilt anyway. I mean, you've had a lot of really great Class A office buildings come on the market few years, some of which hadn't really been fully tenanted or leased when they went out. So yeah, you have a little bit. Certainly, COVID hasn't been great for the downtown office market, but I think as much as anything, the change in interest rates, the fact that the lending criteria for building buildings on spec have changed. I mean, right now there's almost very little commercial private development going unless you are an end user. If you're a manufacturer, if you want to build a plant, an EV plant, a battery plant. But these are market swings. I'm certainly not thinking that cities are dead by any means. I mean, I think it will come back. There will always be parts. There's always infrastructure. Cities are building and agencies are building. Healthcare is always going to be building something, and eventually the demand for commercial office space will come back, or mixed use type developments, and even if New York is relatively slow, there will be growth in other cities, right? I mean, people people are not just working at home, but their homes are also in places where they want to live, and so those places you want to start to develop offices and communities in smaller places, but eventually I think people naturally want to be together, so I'm kind of bullish on the future of cities. We're in a little bit of an unprecedented political time when it seems like people who don't live in cities are rooting for cities to fail, and people who live in cities are rooting for everyone else to fail. And
Sure.
hopefully we'll get past that at some point and try to find a way to let cities do what cities do well, which is connect people and connect arts and all the things that really make cities what they are, with beautiful architecture, beautiful skylines, and still have the urban and suburban, and let people live however they want to live. It's a huge country and plenty of opportunity in it. So some of this infighting seems really sort of counterproductive to a healthy economy, but I'm still pretty bullish on the future of cities.
Yeah, no, that's good to hear. I mean, especially since I live in Chicago. But here, I've never been to Charlotte before, and it's a nice city. I would call it a mid-sized city, but it's funny how, yeah, like you said, some certain cities have their boom times, so to speak, and others don't. People would say like 20 years ago, Charlotte didn't have much, nearly as much as they've got right now. And now look at it; it looks great. I mean,
So when we moved to Columbia is 90 miles south of Charlotte, and
I didn't realize
not
it's that
that long
close.
ago, the cities were fairly comparable in size.
okay,
But over 25 years or so, Charlotte made an affirmative decision to grow. It attracted a lot of bank in
Right.
business. It grew the airport. It created, a transportation network around the city. And I think they made an affirmative choice to be a bigger city than a sleepy small town southern city. I mean, really, Atlanta was
The big
was
one.
it, and
Yep.
now Charlotte really has tremendous amount of industry and businesses around here, and it's really grown a lot. I mean, we don't do a lot of work in this particular market, and there are a lot of good fabricators in this region, so it's a good steel area. But the city itself has really grown. You see the construction around here. There's cranes in the city, as there are in a lot of places right now, but there's a lot of cranes in Charlotte, and there's some really beautiful buildings dotting the skyline.
and just back to that fabrication, making the transition all those years ago from one career to the other. What was there anything, or what was maybe something that surprised you the most about the steel fabrication industry?
Well, I think what surprised me is how addictive it is. People get into the steel business and really don't leave. I mean, it's really been something that's been interesting to me, because I think, particularly because I've had an opportunity to work with the AISC board for a long time. I went on the board fairly quickly in my career, so I got to meet and learn from some real legends in the industry. I mean, I was able to overlap with people who had really built the industry to what it was, and then sort of take that and transition to the next generation. But what was really interesting to me is just how many families had built their businesses around a steel fabrication plant, and they're very smart people in this industry who could have done a lot of other things. But I think once you get into this business and you find a niche in it and you like it, it's really an addictive, all-encompassing type of industry, and people have built family businesses around it. People have built, relationships around their businesses, and it's really fascinating. There's a lot of different aspects of steel fabrication, steel contracting. They give people opportunities to bring a lot of skills to the table, and the other neat part about it is when you're done with something, you have a really cool building there. I mean, when you fly in and you fly through an airport that you built, or you fly into New York and see a tower that we built, or into Philadelphia, or past, the business school at the University of South Carolina, or just whatever projects we've had a hand in building, there's really a sense of a legacy, a permanency to your work, and that you've built something that will be there for a long time.
Yeah, no, it's very satisfying, I'm sure. So speaking of Philadelphia, and we're talking about Columbia earlier, I have to ask, so how was that transition early back in the day, going from, major northeastern city to capital city in South Carolina, university town, a little bit smaller?
It was interesting in that I really had no idea what to expect. I really didn't know very much about Columbia, other than what you basically described as what you would think of it as there's state capital, state university, and a big Army base, and that's historically been the economic engines. One of the nice things, though, was that Owens Steel had such a good reputation in the city. So when to come into Columbia and sort of people would know that we had sort of brought Owens Steel back. It made it an easy fit. It was relatively easy to make connections in the city with the business community and with the political leadership and the people we needed to kind of get our business up and running, banks and all that. But again, because we had work in the Northeast, I still always had sort of the ability to stay in those to get out and go back and the neighborhoods, the Italian food and neighborhood foods, that's something you don't even find in Charlotte, honestly, and that's what I miss most
Sure.
from the Northeast. But I got to tell you, even Columbia hasn't grown certainly to the extent that Charlotte has, but it has grown a lot in the last few years. And there are really good restaurants, and eventually they're starting to do some development around the river that runs through the city. And so, I think whether my kids come back there or not, or however, the city has really grown, and hopefully will continue, because I think it's got some good opportunities. It has a lot of the benefits of being around a city without some of the baggage of what you see in other places. It's a very safe place.
Sure.
It's weather's great, and plenty to do.
Yeah, the weather's great. Although I will say, one time I came to visit the plant, it was about 102 degrees that day.
That may be the biggest shock when you move from a place in the middle of the summer and you come down there and it's like just it is a stifling heat. But I think our guys would rather work in 102 degree stifling heat than when it gets cold in February and they got to come out in the morning and and you peel off the layers as the day warms up. But no, I mean, we don't have a lot of snow. We don't have a lot of weather hazards, but yeah, it does get pretty hot in the summer.
For sure. So it's great. It makes me want to go back to Columbia again. I do want to ask a couple of quick questions about your hometown. First one, Pat's or Geno's or somebody else?
D'Alessandro's is the best cheesesteak in town.
Okay.
If you do the Philadelphia trip, there's a place called the Nick's that does a roast beef sandwich.
Mm-hmm.
They're in Reading Terminal, which is the old historical terminal downtown,
Oh,
which, I think ASC has done a couple of events right there.
Mm-hmm.
We did a Future Leaders event
Yeah,
there a few years
I love
ago.
that. I
So
love
the
that
Nick's
market.
is the downtown spot for a roast beef. They also have one in the Navy Yard, D'Alessandro's for the cheesesteak. But if you do, for just the sheer feel of Philly, Geno's or Pat's sometime between midnight and 2 a.m. is always a fun spot to do some people watching, if not the best cheesesteaks.
Sure. Yeah, it's one of those things people always seem to be very opinionated about one or the other. But are you still an Eagles fan?
Absolutely an Eagles fan, and more importantly, raised kids as Eagles fans. So we had opportunities to be out in Phoenix for the Super Bowl and unfortunately watch them lose. But Eagle fans travel well, so we did have a blast with all the other Eagles fans. We try to catch 1 or 2 games a year on the road, if not in Philly. We were out in Indianapolis and visited our board chair, Steve Knitter, in Indianapolis, and just happened to coordinate that for the weekend that the Eagles were in Indianapolis playing the Colts. So Steve was a gracious host, and my son and I got to catch an Eagles-Colts game. And
Who won that one?
The Eagles did win that
Okay.
one, so that was good. Yeah. But and we've gone up to see them play in various places. So that's the other nice thing is and especially really through AISC, I've gotten to know so many of the people in this industry all across the country, and have a lot of really good friends in the industry. Even though we're competitors, even though we all but the friendships and the relationships, both personal and professional, have been really gratifying. I mean, that's part of the really nice thing about having the opportunity to work with an organization like AISC, is that you really see a national presence, and we're all doing the same kind of thing in different markets, different types of products, but we all have common interests in a successful, healthy, profitable steel industry. So made a lot of friends doing it over the years.
Yeah, great to hear. Well, thanks again for your time, and congratulations on the award, David.
Appreciate it.
Take
Thank
care.
you.
Thanks.
Thanks.